Geneva for putting together this very impressive panel. I think with the brains around in this room, it could have been more appropriate than if my other colleagues could have been taken, like Joe is sitting here, but I'm sure everybody will be contributing to the discussion there too. And I just want to welcome you, all of you. I am from Eastern Horn of Africa Human Rights Defenders Project, based here with the Secretariat for 75 prominent human rights organizations in the sub-region from Sudan to Burundi. And so 10 countries and 2 special territories, but I think in 3 days' time, one of them will be full member as a nation state, that's South Sudan. I represent the efforts of those brave human rights activists in the sub-region, and also the staff which implements that, who are now around 20 of them based here in Kampala and some based in Kenya. I just want to take also this opportunity to also say Julie welcome and see him again for the, I think last time we met was at the White House when we were meeting President Obama. And now Adrian also had the privilege with us to meet Ms. Clinton on the sidelines of the Community of Democracies in Vilnius. I left him there, and I'm glad that he's back safely. I just want to take now Eastern Horn of Africa Human Rights Defenders Project supports human rights activism in the region through capacity building, advocacy, and protection. More often than not, the courageous work of the activists to put them in a position of great personal and professional risk. From its inception in 2005, and I want to emphasize that, the network was co-established by LGBTI Coalition, Sexual Minority of Uganda. So many people wonder why LGBTI work is the forefront of our work, because the network is co-owned by the community itself. They are not knocking the door to say that should I come in, but they are already there. So we are obliged to do the work the same way we protect other human rights defenders in the sub-region. The HRDF has been supporting human rights activism that fight for the rights of sexual minorities since then. That's lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and intersex people. Defenders working in Africa seeking to protect the rights of sexual minorities face additional challenge due to the fact that society and fellow mainstream human rights defenders often do not recognize the universal application of human rights. And that's again the challenge also we have been facing around. The theme of this conference is of course governance and immigration, although it's difficult to establish a direct causal link to demonstrate exactly how the government of Uganda is contributing to different forms of forced immigration of its LGBTI citizens. I will urge that existing legislation and draft laws, as well as harassment by the police, certainly contribute to the forced migration and relocation of LGBTI people in Uganda. I will give few examples of harassment by state actors and non-state actors, and then discuss the different forms of forced immigration or relocation, when we put it in a gentle way, this has resulted in. If you are interested in reading more about certain examples given here and on the work of the HRDF, please let me refer to you to my paper and to our website, which you will find more information about our LGBTI work. Discrimination by state actors. The most explicit form of discrimination by the state actors in Uganda toward LGBTI people is that homosexuality is currently illegal and punishable by incarceration in prison up to 14 years as a starter. In addition to the current legislation, there are several draft bills that include closures on homosexuality, branding it as an unnatural and criminal act. The most notorious piece of draft legislation attracting much attention within and outside Uganda is without a doubt the anti-homosexual bill that was submitted in October 2009. The bill would not only criminalize acts of homosexuality, but also criminalize any act seen to support sexual, such as aiding, quote unquote, or counseling another to engage in acts of homosexuality. The promotion of homosexuality and failure to report any of the offenses mentioned in the bill to the relevant authorities. The maximum punishment for these offenses is 7 years imprisonment. Officially, the bill is a private member's bill proposed by NRM member of the parliament, David Bahati, who now is a treasurer of the ruling party's caucus, assuming a very important position within the ruling party. However, when the bill was introduced, many members of the government officials, including the department which deals with morals, strongly supported the passage of the bill. After the bill was discussed by Parliament for almost 2010 and again in May 2011, surprisingly, Parliament adjourned without voting on the bill. The danger to this bill draft is that it only sends a signal to society that it's okay to discriminate against LGBTI people. It also makes citizens accomplices in this form of state discrimination, and that's the underlying point. To give an example, if this law is passed, it would mean that we, as East and North Africa Human Rights Defenders Project, would be committing an offense by trying to support the activists fighting for LGBTI rights, rather than turning them into an authorities. So it means if LGBTI member comes and asking for protection, we rather take to the police and say that arrest this gentleman or lady because of she's a member of LGBTI. Over the years, we received several reports of direct harassment of LGBTI activists by the police. I will mention here one example from 2008, which shows how irrational the behavior of the police can be at times. And I like to say at times. In June 2008, 3 LGBT activists attended a global HIV/AIDS conference in Kampala to advocate for the inclusion of the LGBTI community in the HIV/AIDS policy formulation. And I'm happy to report now at New York that has been achieved by the passage of the resolution of the HIV/AIDS policy. Upon arriving, they were arrested, detained, and later charged with criminal trespass. At the time that they were arrested, the police confiscated their phones and the laptop. One of the activists who suffered from ulcers didn't have access to proper medication and food during his detention, which aggravated the ulcers. The organizers of the conference strongly protested the arrest of the 3 activists and refused to file a formal complaint with the police against the activists, which would form the basis of the charges against them. Let me stress that point. The police arrested them without having any charge against them and asked the conference organizers to provide them, the police, with a relevant charge against the 3 activists. When the conference organizers refused to bring a formal complaint, the police then took it upon themselves to be the complainant. The defenders obtained, after having rejected by several lawyers, a lawyer to represent them in court. The lawyer received threat and are told to drop the case. After the release, the organizers of the conference formally invited the activists and they returned to attend the conference. Unfortunately, on their arrival at the venue, the police moved in to arrest them again, but only got hold of one of the activists. The conference organizers went to the police station and secured his release on police bond by testifying about his official invitation. The charges were later dropped. It shows a mere attendance of a very highly relevant, meeting organized by the UN official agents, that LGBTI members even could not go and make their input of that. Discrimination by non-state actors. Although it may not possibly to prove a direct causal link between police violence and discriminatory legislation and the cases of forced migration, such harassment and intimidation on behalf of the state sends out a clear message to society that it's okay to harass and discriminate against the LGBTI people. In the public domain, attacks against LGBTI persons have been fueled by some sections of the media, which have in the past published articles in which they name LGBTI persons in Uganda. More recently, and by now well known, in the case of local tabloid, the Rolling Stone, not to be confused with the one outside, they had published 100 pictures of suspected homosexuals, calling upon the police, the public, to hang them and accusing the LGBTI community of recruiting school children into homosexuality, which proof has never been provided. Following the highly publicized murder of David Kato on 26 January 2011, it was confirmed to many Ugandans that homosexuality really does exist in Uganda. As a result, the situation for many LGBTI people have worsened. Given that David's funeral was covered on a national TV, many of them become publicly exposed as members of the LGBTI community, resulting in an increase of threat and discrimination. Reporting incidents at the Hartip include, and this is not excessive list, break-in in houses and offices with sensitive information, concentrating personal details of LGBTI members being stolen. LGBT activists being fired upon from their jobs. LGBTI activists and their partners being evicted from their homes. Stones being thrown at houses and offices of LGBTI activists. Difficulty in accessing services such as education, including grants and healthcare. LGBTI activists and or people working for their cases being followed. LGBTI members being threatened with violence. You could imagine then the two most prominent ones who were with David Kato in that law case has to be evacuated from the country. When taken into account, I'm talking about now forms of immigration in order to include my 5 minutes. When taking into account the situation of the LGBTI community in Uganda, it will be useful to look at the migration in its widest form, ranking from migration actors, borders, forced relocation within the same country or city, forced relocation outside Uganda, temporary. According to several LGBT activists, the continued harassment by state and non-state actors have directly contributed to their temporary migration out of the country. The most recent case of LGBTI activists having to leave Uganda was just after the murder of David Kato. Following the murder, the three against activists Pepe and Kasha increased it and made the necessary for them to leave the country for the time of their own safety. The chairperson of Sexual Minority Uganda also opted to extend his stay out of the country for safety reasons after Kato's death. There are many other activists who have left the country for their own safety, through many of them returned to bravely continue with the work under very difficult circumstances. Forced relocation within Uganda. Leading figures such as journalists and religious leaders, of course, with some notable exception, continue to condemn and misrepresent homosexuality on a frequent basis. Those LGBTI people that come out either by choice or exposed by others are often no longer welcome in their church. Some activists have openly been named and shamed as recruiters of homosexuality. I heard reported many stories of LGBTI people being followed by border drivers, being threatened by community members, people coming to their houses asking if the gay person lives here, and having stones thrown at houses at night. Some of these LGBT organizations have been broken into, with sensitive information being stolen, such as names and addresses of LGBT activists. The latest one was only yesterday, early in the morning, where arsonists went to one LGBT activist's house and burned the entire furniture and clothing of that person, and left a hateful letter saying that you guys, you are no longer welcome in our community. Move out. And that is still going on. In addition to the psychological stress and the damage the above description incident have had on many of the LGBTI people, it has also disturbed their life in a very practical way. Many of them feel so unsafe in their own homes that they decided to relocate. In many cases, the LGBTI tenant did not have that choice because they were forced to leave, often on short notice, by their landlords. The reason given by the landlord to end the tenants' agreement are often not explicit, linked to their sexual orientation and identity. But many of the evicted LGBTI tenants state that their eviction was not related to any breach of their contract. Unfortunately, these forms of forced relocation are becoming a common pattern, with many LGBTI people remaining without permanent address for long periods of time. Voluntary migration. I have 1 minute, and I think I might not be able to reasonably finish my paper, so I might just... So there's also voluntary migration. There's efforts to prevent forced immigration, LGBTI human rights defenders, and then there is a little talk I want to make in conclusion. We are very happy to know that the last month the UN Human Rights Council voted in favor of the resolution proposed by the South Africa that recalls the universality, interdependence, indivisibility, and interrelatedness of human rights, and expressed concern about the act of violence and discrimination against individuals because of their sexual orientation and gender identity. Unlike the previous draft, in conclusion, Madam, there is no notion of elaborating new concepts and norms, and I'm very proud and happy to be part of the civil society delegation led by John Fisher to meet the South African delegation to reason them, to remove that draft and reintroduce the one which has been widely accepted in Geneva. Sadly, but unsurprisingly, Uganda voted in line with the other African group position and opted to oppose this historic resolution, sending a clear signal yet again, if one were needed, that discrimination and act of violence against LGBTI people will be tolerated in this very country called Uganda. I thank you very much.
Thank you.